大家好，欢迎参加2025年性别平权国际与博物馆国际线上论坛。我们今天的主题是女生博物，穿梭在博物馆的女性叙事。我是今天的主持人林文玲，来自国立台湾艺术大学艺术管理与文化政策研究所。那在会议开始之前呢，我想介绍一下我们今天与会的嘉宾。我们这次的主办单位是国立国父纪念馆，然后我们邀请到罗美正秘书，然后以及国父纪念馆的3位同仁许成玉、梁兰芳跟蒋燕美，等一下会跟我们分享。那我们这次的2场国际讲座呢，首先呢是邀请到了荷兰国家博物馆的2位计划主持人，就是 Marion Anker 跟 Laurien Werff。那另外还有一位讲者是来自于女性之声的共同创办人 Vivian Wenli Lin。然后另外我们还有邀请到2位评论人，是国立台湾艺术大学艺术管理文化政策研究所的殷宝宁老师，还有国立台湾艺术大学艺术与人文教育研究所的吴岱融所长。那我们这次的会议是采取同步口译，所以在这边我也介绍2位口译老师，是徐婉莹 NoNo 老师，还有施燕如 Jennifer 老师。好，那在会议开始之前呢，我们就邀请到国父纪念馆的罗美珍秘书为我们致辞，欢迎秘书。
各位嘉宾，大家好。今年国际博物馆界多重视多元与包容的议题，那性别议题成为重要的焦点。本馆首次举办性别平权为主题的国际论坛，邀请国内外专家共同交流，期盼透过女性的叙事，让博物馆呈现更多元的观点与文化价值。因为我们相信，共融方能共荣，多元才能永续。最后，祝我们论坛圆满成功，谢谢大家，谢谢。
谢谢秘书。那接下来我们就邀请国父纪念馆的同仁许成玉、梁兰芳跟蒋燕美来帮我们分享博物馆的经验，主题是博物馆性别平权案例经验分享。
这样就分享了吗？这样是 OK 的吧？好，大家好，我是国父纪念馆的许成玉。那今天很开心有机会能够分享国馆近年在推动博物馆的性别平权的小成果。那首先想请大家看一段影片。
成玉的简报要全荧幕吗？
哦，好，不好意思。好。我觉得这样很打扰。对，不好意思，对，好。
工作家庭是21。这不只是你的事情，怀孕就要失去工作吗？除非您让他继续在这里工作。晋级吧，花样正义！
好，那如同刚刚大家影片中看到的，只要年满30岁，结婚、怀孕就要丢掉工作。现在的人可能会觉得很难想象，但这其实是发生在1980年代台湾职场女性普遍面对的日常，而且这段历史并没有我们想象中的那么遥远。那转变的契机是什么呢？1987年7月，台湾刚刚解除戒严之际，同年的8月， 当时的国父纪念馆女性服务员蔡金鹤女士，她主动发起，联合其他57名女性服务员，决定不再忍受单身禁运条款，以及年满30岁必须离职的不平等契约。于是找了律师争取工作权，而且还获得了民间妇女团体的声援。这场抗争也成为了台湾性别平等工作法立法运动的开端。这场影响台湾性别平权、民主化深远的历史，明明至今和我们的生活息息相关，但是大部分的台湾人几乎都没有听说过。随着现今博物馆更加强调多元包容的价值，作为一个发生在博物馆馆内的平权事件，而且参与这段历史的员工仍然在馆服务，自己来说自己的故事，其实这对一个博物馆或是当事者而言都是非常不容易的事情，但也可以说是非常珍贵的案例。所以这也算是国馆回应台湾社会公共性的创新尝试。那其实呢，国父纪念馆算是一个非典型的博物馆，所以我们创新的第一步是用很素朴的工作方式，一边摸索一边学习。最初想到的是用比较亲切的漫画来讲述这段故事，所以邀请了漫画家来国父纪念馆跟员工做访谈。取材过程中也找到了当年协助女性服务员的吕荣海律师，以及妇女新知基金会的朋友们一起交流。也因为这场交流，妇女新知基金会的伙伴们拍摄了讲述蔡金鹤心路历程的纪录片《金鹤》。而吕荣海律师他也回想起，其实他在1986年曾经为另外一个实性结婚退职金案写下他们为何不能结婚这本对台湾女性劳工影响深远的书籍，决定重新自费出版。可以说从公部门和民间的角度，我们各自用自己的方式让这段历史更完整更立体。那我们在去年完成了这本漫画之后，2024年响应国际女孩日，正式推出晋级吧花样正义，并且透过公众活动，比如说幸运签诗、集章、抽奖小游戏等方式，来把历史故事分享给大众。那接着我们也带着这本漫画走出去，包含2024年到中正纪念堂前面的广场参与台湾阅读节的摆摊，今年也主动被内湖社区大学邀请去演讲。那大家会不会觉得照片中的人有点眼熟？那没错，其实大家才刚刚看到他们年轻时候的身影，他们走过那段历史，如今自己把自己的故事讲给下一代的孩子听，真的是非常令人动容的画面。然后为了要让更年幼的小孩也有机会启发性平观念，我们和台北市立图书馆3星分馆还有石牌分馆合作推广漫画的同时，也一起策划了我的彩色历险记性平绘本主题书展。然后在去年女孩日活动的当天，我们自己 DIY 把国馆的凉亭打造成彩色故事屋，用国语和台语讲绘本故事，让小孩子在游戏中也可以培养性平观念。那接着我们也继续延伸发挥创意，比如说使用中央研究院的开放式博物馆免费策展平台，设计了一个性平绘本趣味测验。你可以从你最喜欢的绘本台词中找出勇气、突破、多元、自由4大精神亮点特质，而且这些台词还有同事跟同事的小孩来配音哦。欢迎大家搜寻我的彩色历险记来玩玩看，来找一下你的亮点特质是什么。好，那我们在去年累积了漫画还有刚刚说的小小作品后，我们也希望能够连结更多民间的专业力量，所以今年和台湾国家妇女馆妇女新知基金会合作办理 3场座谈会，分别从纪录片、漫画、法律的角度来爬梳台湾的性别平权历史，包含聊聊台湾漫画产业中的女性从业人员在产业中所扮演的角色，还有刚刚有提到吕荣海律师他所写的《他们为何不能结婚》的新书发表会中，邀请到了书中的女主角杨丽君女士来分享自己的故事，还有妇女新知基金会所拍摄的纪录片《金鹤》也是首次在台北放映。那这个活动刚刚在8月结束，那我们也拍摄了纪录片跟大家做分享。等一下。
了解这些故事，让我们更能珍惜我们当下拥有的权利。期盼今天的座谈会，让性别平权与公共议题的对话滋养台湾的文化土壤，成为我们携手前进的力量。
我在妇女运动40几年，那这一段漫长的路，很多人问我说：“你真的是大菩萨？”我说不是。我说真正的菩萨就是这些能够站出来为他的权益奋斗的这些人才是真正的菩萨。如果当初没有蔡金鹤愿意站出来，我们不会有今天的世界公投平权法。
面对打压，还是要一个人要站出来。大家也不会说30岁怀孕就，所以大家可是他们都怕。
此时此刻，台湾在劳动市场的性别真的完全平等了嘛？妇女在走的过程当中，其实一定是跟整个民主体制的发展是息息相关的哦。
一个民族、一个社会能够认识大家真正的历史，而且那个历史可能是属于人民的历史，不是来自于由上而下，可能其实是我们能够形成一个更好的一个认同跟共同体的这样的一个很重要的一个元素。
好，那因为时间的关系，所以我们就只看一小段。那之后我也会把完整影片连结分享给大家，那有兴趣的朋友也可以慢慢观赏。那最后呢，我们想要用性别平等工作法立法的关键人物前立法委员尤美女律师给我们的勉励来做一个小结。为什么要知道这段历史？是因为我们必须知道权利是怎么来的，大家才懂得去珍惜、去捍卫。因为争取权利是非常困难的，但要消失是很容易的。这也是我们推动这个议题的初衷，希望能透过这段历史故事与大众创造生命的交流。一方面回顾过去台湾性别平权的发展，另一方面也希望带着这份关怀进入生活，展望未来。性别其实是和每个人都相关的议题。如何跟得上时代变化？如何让差异能够和平共处？让社会发挥多元的价值，或许也是我们每一个人都值得带回生活中持续思考的议题。那其实刚刚就是一个小小的开场白。那其实我们今天真正最重要的分享，就是很幸运的可以邀请到2位刚刚说过的有经历过当年历史的同仁梁兰芳跟蒋燕梅女士来分享她的个人经验，还有工作观察以及心得。那我们首先请兰芳来做分享。
大家好，我是梁兰芳，非常高兴参与今天的国际论坛，分享我的心路历程。首先，我要感谢的是我的前同事蔡金鹤女士。由于她的勇敢，带领着我们争取女性平等的工作权，后续得到律师及妇女团体的声援，唤起了当时台湾社会对职场性别权的关注。从1987年的国父纪念馆抗争事件后，经过14年的努力，直到2001年两性工作平等法才立法通过，保障了全国的女性同胞，当然也包括我自己，不再受限于年满30岁或是因为结婚而必须被强迫离职的困境，可以发挥自己的所学，自由选择工作，直到65岁退休。今天回头看38年前的抗争事件， 我很骄傲自己曾参与其中，因为这是正确的事。谢谢大家的聆听。接着请蒋燕梅女士分享，谢谢。
大家好，我是蒋燕梅，很高兴今天能够跟大家在这里分享这一段历史。现在回头看当年联署抗争的事件，让我感受最深刻的就是蔡金鹤对我的影响。在台湾社会环境保守的年代，很多的行业对于女性的年龄以及怀孕的限制是很普遍存在的。身在其中的我们都觉得不公平，但是并没有为自己争取工作权益的观念。是蔡金鹤唤起同仁对性别平权意识的觉醒。在我的记忆中，这件事情的过程是异常的艰辛。在期间，蔡金鹤遭受很多工作上的压力，甚至于有一些同仁都不能够理解，他只能够利用各种机会一一的向同仁解释说明。即使当下他受了很多的种种的困难，但是他始终都没有放弃。他所做的一切并不是为了他自己哦。念数学系的他，其实已经在为他当老师的职业生涯做规划。他所做的努力与坚持，只因为他说过，对的事情总是要有人去做。作为这段历史的参与者，在这里叙事这一段历史，我觉得非常的有意义。这件事情不但唤起了大众对性别平权议题的重视，也让台湾的社会对于女性在职场上的角色更为包容。当我结婚生孩子以后，每天都面对着工作还有照顾小孩的压力，现在回想起来，其实是很辛苦的。可是在忙碌的生活中，我每天都觉得很充实，因为在工作上有机会不同的在业务中学习，觉得自己都是随着学习成长的。这一路走来，我觉得很庆幸的是，我不再被迫要在工作和家庭中做2择1的选择。我可以做我自己喜欢的工作，兼顾家庭，跟着社会的发展脚步前行。这是我深刻的感受。这是以上我的分享，谢谢大家。
真的非常谢谢2位同仁的分享。就虽然这故事这样一起参与听过好多次，但每次听都觉得非常的感动。那这也是我们今天国馆的经验分享，衷心期盼我们踏出的这一步对彼此都有意义，也期待等等听到国外博物馆的经验，也欢迎大家给我们多多指教，谢谢。
非常谢谢陈玉、兰芳跟叶美的分享，让我们知道国馆其实在性别平权方面，其实在这几年做了很多事情，然后呢，还有这个历史发展的过程，特别是对台湾的两性工作法立法的影响哦。好，那很高兴哦。那接下来我们要邀请到荷兰国家博物馆的博物馆中的女性计划的2位主持人 Marion 跟 Laurien 来为我们带来他们的主讲主题。那 Marion 你们可以来播放你们的简报了，那同时我会再稍微介绍一下你们2位。好，那就是我们今天他们的主题叫做国立荷兰国家博物馆的女性，在国家博物馆中重塑性别叙事。那这2位主讲人呢，也就是这个计划的共同主持人。那 Marion 呢，她的专业领域是荷兰19与20世纪世界文化史，那他们特别在关注在女性史、殖民史跟制度史，然后她的研究兴趣与工作呢，他主要专注在对于如何放大过去在历史中被忽视或边缘群体的声音呢，特别感兴趣。那这个是 Marion 的介绍。那在 Laurien 的部分呢，他的专长是荷兰其现代的文化史，那特别关注艺术史中的女性、纸本作品以及古文字学。那他是在2016年的时候开始在荷兰国家博物馆工作，同时也参与阿姆斯特丹档案馆的多项计划。 那所以很高兴今天可以邀请到我们2位主讲人，然后来让我们了解他们如何在荷兰国家博物馆中去推动这个博物馆中的女性的计划。那我们现在就欢迎2位。那在这个过程中也提醒大家，就是如果有需要问问题的话，旁边我们有 Slido 可以点进去做提问。那我们最后在综合讨论的部分呢，就有机会可以解答大家的问题。好，那我们就来线上的掌声欢迎2位主讲人。
Thank you very much for this lovely introduction, and good morning from Amsterdam. We're extremely honored to speak from the Netherlands to this engaged group of museum professionals and gender experts in Taiwan. So, as already said, we're Laurien and Marion, and jointly we chair the interdisciplinary research project Women of the Rijksmuseum. We truly feel connected to the gender equality mission of the Dr. Sun Yat-sen Memorial Hall. In the same spirit, our Women of the Rijksmuseum project is dedicated to highlighting the impact of women on art and history through our museum's collection and in our galleries. It is very inspiring to see institutions and professionals all over the world embracing shared values on gender equality. Today, we'll share our project with you and explain what we do, illustrating our practices with concrete examples.
So, before we tell you more about our project, it might be helpful to provide you with some background on the Rijksmuseum itself. The Rijksmuseum is the National Museum of Art and History in the Netherlands, housed in this building you see here on screen since 1885. And its goal is to offer a representative overview of 800 years of Dutch history, spanning from 1200 to the present. Oh, and I think you can't see. Do you see my second screen? Maybe not yet.
No. Can you please 可以请翻译老师帮我们说一下好了，就是可能现在看不到他第2张图片。
Okay. 等一下，可以看出。Maybe you see it now. Yes, you see it now, I think. I'm very...
Yes.
I hope you see it now. Okay, I see you thumbs up. Okay, thank you, Young. Thank you. Okay, so as I just told, we're the Rijksmuseum and the History Museum, Art and History Museum of the Netherlands, housed in this building since 1885. You see now on screen the building. And the Rijksmuseum offers a representative overview of 800 years of Dutch history, spanning from 1200 to the present, within an international context. And at the same time, the museum's mission is to continually reflect on our collection and our history and incorporate fresh perspectives and seek relevance for a broad, contemporary, national and international audience. And our extensive collection is over 1 million objects, of which approximately 8,000 are on display at the moment. And this collection is very diverse. It consists of Western art from the Middle Ages to the present and includes works on papers, paintings, sculptures, costumes, jewelry, applied arts, and other historical objects. And we have also a substantial gallery dedicated to Asian art called the Asian Pavilion. Despite this wide scope, the Rijksmuseum is best known for its 7th century Dutch paintings. The finest selection of these works is displayed in our Gallery of Honor, the most well-known and perhaps the most beloved space in our museum. If you ever have the chance to visit the Rijksmuseum, you'll probably be able to enjoy, among many other ones, masterpieces you might already recognize, like The Nightwatch by Rembrandt van Rijn, The Milkmaid by Johannes Vermeer, and of course, beautiful still lifes like this one by Floris Glaes van Dijk. But back to our main subject. What can we say
about our museum and collection from a gender perspective. We could argue that the museum is, from its origins, a male-dominated space with a male-centered narrative. It was built by men, and for a long time its artworks were selected and curated by men, just like Western art history itself, which was largely written by men during its formative periods.
However, that doesn't mean that women's narratives are absent from the museum. On the contrary, women as makers, as donors, as actors in history can be found everywhere at the Rijksmuseum. These women's stories just need a dedicated spotlight, a bit of extra attention to bring them into plain view. And that is exactly what we strive to do with our Women of the Rijksmuseum project. Our aim is a permanent and self-evident representation of women in the presentation and the collection of the Rijksmuseum. And our research is built on 3 core pillars, or core topics, so to say. It's first on women makers, secondly, women in history, and third, women in our institutional history. And we firmly believe that meaningful change from within the museum can only happen when diverse departments are actively involved. From education to marketing and from floor staff to fundraising, more than 30 colleagues across the museum are involved in our project. And they act as ambassadors for our project and help engaging the whole organization. And alongside the Rijksmuseum team, the Rijksmuseum Women of the Rijksmuseum team, we receive financial support by the Women of the Rijksmuseum Fund. And this fund receives contributions from both companies and individuals and enables us to carry out large-scale projects and with them drive significant change. The project's results can be seen in various forms of output, including publications, exhibitions, labels, new acquisitions of art, audio guides, podcasts, and an annual symposium. And we give you a lot of examples during this presentation. So we have already shown you a glimpse of our Gallery of Honor, our so-called high altar of the museum, showcasing the best of the 17th century Dutch masters, but omitting women until 2021. The first milestone of the Women of the Rijksmuseum project was getting 17th century Dutch women painters into the Gallery of Honor. Because even though there were fewer women painters at that time, there are definitely ones that deserve a place alongside their male contemporaries, men that had already been admitted to the canon of art history by the men who shaped it during the 19th and 20th centuries. Thanks to our project, women painters have a permanent place on display in the Gallery of Honor since International Women's Day of 2021, which was on February 8th. This means that alongside Rembrandt van Rijn, Johannes Vermeer, Jan Steen and many others, the public now also sees Judith Leyster, Maria van Oosterwijk and Rachel Ruijs. Giving those women their legitimate place in the Gallery of Honor is crucial to us, as it is only then that they can really become considered true Dutch masters to the general public, for whom they otherwise remain largely unknown or still subordinate to their male colleagues. We were fortunate enough to already have several works by women painters that could be included in the Gallery of Honor, but such works of that period still remain scarce. So in addition to looking at what our collection already holds, we actively look for ways to fill in gaps. For the Gallery of Honor, we were fortunately able to increase the number of paintings through a private collection loan and an acquisition of a still life by Maria van Oosterwijk. This masterwork by one of the most successful flower still life painters of that time was acquired in 2023 with support of the Women of the Rijksmuseum Fund. After thorough technical research and restoration,
It was installed in our Gallery of Honor on March 8, 2025, last year. And it was put alongside a portrait of the artist herself, already present in our collection since 1885. This really made a strong visual statement, making the presence of women artists in the Dutch 17th century undeniable. But our project is about much more than just the Gallery of Honor. We believe that women should be visible everywhere in our museum, from the medieval galleries to the 20th century, and throughout all our collections, from applied arts to works on paper and paintings. And when it comes to artists, we think it's important to broaden the scope. Because Van Oosterwijk, Ruys and Leijster are artists that can be subjected to the traditional and patriarchal standards of quality, mainly because of the fact that they had access to the same professional training as men in their time. But these standards of quality excluded everyone without access to such training, and in that period, that was especially the case for women. So, would it not be interesting to look beyond those traditional standards of quality? Because we should not always want to look for female equivalents of the male within male standards. Quality can be measured in many different ways, and reconsidering and questioning what quality is leads to a more inclusive canon of art history. Illustrative for this case is a portrait by Gesina ter Borg that we acquired in 2023. It is the only known signed painted portrait made by her, and it's a wonderful addition to her work in our collection, which already included hundreds of watercolor drawings and another painting that she made together with her older brother, who was a famous genre and portrait painter of that time. Critics, comparing the painting by Gesina to the work of her brother, have dismissed it as of a lesser quality and therefore uninteresting and unworthy of the Rijksmuseum. That's a view that we absolutely don't share. Gesina did not receive the same professional training as her brother did, so judging her work by the same standards is both unfair and meaningless. Why not look at what she did actually accomplish? This painting not only reveals her incredible eye for detail, so meticulously executed and so characteristic of her work, as can also be seen in the many watercolor drawings made by her. Those drawings, by the way, also demonstrate her unmatched mastery of that medium. But the painting also carries another aspect that adds to the quality of it, its subject and the endearing rendering of it. Because we're not just looking at a portrait of a 2-year-old boy, but we're looking at a posthumous memorial portrait of Gesina's brother Moses, who died in a naval battle at age 22. In this portrait that we see here, she commemorates her beloved youngest brother as a toddler, recalling their childhood together while subtly alluding to his future military career through details as his toy horse, drum and flag. With this very personal painting, she gives us a glimpse into her emotions, making space for both her mourning and grief, as well as her joy-filled memories of their shared childhood together. And all of this is still palpable 350 years later, making it a universally moving work. And isn't that what art is all about? Its power to really touch us. So for us, and as we have noticed for most visitors, these qualities make Gesina's painting far more engaging and interesting than her brother's so-called better executed work of another toddler.
So what about the applied arts, which make up a substantial part of the Rijksmuseum collection? In these collections, we often encounter unknown makers, which can be partly explained by the collaborative nature of the production process of many applied arts. Women contributors sometimes remain hidden in this chain. So, thanks to our funding, we were able to appoint a dedicated researcher Naomi Bisping, for 1 year to uncover women's stories within the applied arts on display from the 18th century galleries. Her research revealed a rich variety of new stories in all layers of the production chain, including women as makers and as commissioners or patrons. So for today, we want to highlight one example in which we find the involvement of women particularly fascinating. Thanks to Naomi's research, we can now highlight the contributions of women to the creation and collection of these popular 18th century clocks and chandeliers you see here on screen. The porcelain flowers used in these decorative objects were crafted in an all-female workshop at the French Vincennes porcelain manufactory. This floral workshop was led by Marie-Henriette Gravenmille, who employed 45 women. Under her direction, the workshop flourished, and her porcelain flowers were in high demand for the use in pendules, candelabra, and statues. Madame de Pompadour, a prominent figure in French court, was the factory's most important client and played a key role in popularizing these objects from across Europe. Around 1750, at the height of the porcelain flower production, Gravenmille's atelier made up half of the factory's entire staff, while generating 80% of its total revenue. So all this information had not been previously documented, neither in our internal records nor on the gallery text labels. In total, Naomi's research resulted in 70 new gallery labels for the 18th century galleries, in a well-documented information in our internal records, an online entry, such as you see here. This is just one example of them. And there was an article in a Dutch magazine written about this research. So the outcomes of the research allows us to highlight a gender perspective on the applied arts in our collection, not only by adding new names to the production chain, but also by moving beyond the genius maker and towards a more collaborative form of creation. And with this, we are opening up space to recognize the role of women in this process. So, as briefly mentioned before, the Rijksmuseum is not just an art museum. It is the National Museum of Art and History. Therefore, it is also of great importance to us to rethink our historical narrative within the museum. And when it comes to women depicted on art in our galleries, the question isn't whether they are present, because they are everywhere in our museum, but the question is whether they are being noticed and how they are presented and described. All too often, they were hidden in plain sight, and their roles were misinterpreted or neglected over time, leaving them as passive actors. Over the past few years, we have done a lot to make these women more visible, especially through research and by updating text labels. So let's look at some examples together.
Okay, let's begin with an example that shows how women in our museum can be both omnipresent and yet hidden in plain sight. In this painting, which is occasionally on view in our Gallery of Honor, we see a tailor's workshop in the 17th century. 4 figures are shown in a Dutch interior. And as you can see on the old text label on the screen, until last year, it only informed the visitors about the tailor's craft and about the presence and role of paintings in everyday Dutch households. But remarkably, as you can see on this slide, the woman who is wearing outerwear and is so prominently present in the scene was not mentioned at all. So what happens if we do include her? Here is the new label. I will read it out loud. A woman runs errands at the with a market bucket on her arm. Inside the tailor's workshop, she deliberates over a coat. The tailors are seated on a raised platform to make the most out of the daylight. A hank of thread hangs on the ready above the table. Hanging on the wall is a river landscape, dispelling the notion that only affluent individuals could afford to have paintings in their homes in the 17th century. So, as you can hopefully see, the woman becomes a natural part of the story. And by starting the label with her, she invites us into the workshop and leads us through the painting. The next example is one of my favorite ones. On this painting, we see 3 people in front of a 17th century Dutch bakery. For today, you may ignore the boy on the right. He is felt to be the son of the painter. So what remains are the man and the woman. The woman was mentioned in the old title, but not on equal terms with her husband, as she was referred to as the wife of, giving her a very passive role. But let's have a closer look. What are they actually doing? The man is showing us a freshly baked loaf of bread, referring to his craft. He is the one who bakes the bread. And the woman is holding a bread and actually presenting it to us. She's presenting us her wares. This tells us that they ran the bakery together. He was responsible for the production, while she took care of the sales. For the 17th century viewer, this was an obvious fact. In Dutch society at the time, it was very common for women to work, and in family businesses like this one, women usually ran the shop. But for our modern eyes and our curatorial predators, this fact was not self-evident anymore. So the man became the baker and the woman became the wife, and the title underscored that. To rectify this, we renamed the painting to Baker's Couple, Arend Oostwaert and Catharina Keizerswaard, thus giving the woman agency back and doing justice to the historical reality. Catharina Keizerswaard, the baker's wife, or now part of the baker's couple, is not the only woman who was reduced to a wife of. In fact, many women in Western museums have long been or still are. To tackle this issue in our museum, we revisited titles and labels in our galleries and organized a course for students in collaboration with the University of Amsterdam in 2023. It was titled The Wife of, and each student was assigned a portrait of a woman who was labeled as a wife of. And each student was asked to research what could be uncovered about her. And as it turned out, there was a story to tell for every woman. Each one of them was much more than just a wife of. This allowed us to restore part of their identity and to challenge the one-sided view of women from that period, a view that is still widespread amongst the general public, and it was shaped more by 19th and 20th century ideas than by historical reality. The information gathered by the students was used for new text labels, and a few cases were made into videos, like the one we're about to show you, which was investigated by our former intern Lot Bouwman. I will now start the video.
I'm Lot Bouwman, and this double portrait of Abraham Kastelein and Margarethe van Banke by Jan de Braai shows an amicable couple sitting hand in hand among books, globes and atlases. The head in the background is a portrait of Laurens Jansson Koster. He was the Dutch inventor of the art of printing, and as Abraham was a publisher, all these attributes seem to refer to his job. He was the owner of the Haarlem publishing house In de Blije Druk, City Printer, and founder of the oldest and still existing Dutch newspaper, the Haarlemse Courant. So why is this couple sitting hand in hand? According to the Rijksmuseum label, this was because of their loving relationship. And although this might be true, none of the attributes refer to marriage or love. So what was Margaretha van Banken's role in all this? A lot of information about her was readily available. For instance, we know that after Abraham's death, she successfully took over the business. So she must have been very familiar with the ins and outs of running the place. And moreover, a year later she remarried, but stipulated that the business and newspaper remained in her name. She continued to use the name of her late husband and her own name as Stadsdrukster of Haarlem, all to keep the business a family company. So just like her first husband, she was a savvy businesswoman who wasn't afraid to take drastic measures to get her way. In 1692, she stood her ground when the city council was to impose a doubling of taxes on newspapers. She thought the tax to be absurd, and she even threatened to close her business. The burgomasters caved. They didn't dare to lose the income of such a popular paper. This story teaches us that it wasn't unusual for women to take care of the administrative and financial aspects of a business. It turns out that more female family members played a role at the printing firm over the decades. Earlier, Van Banken's mother-in-law took over when her husband died, until her sons could continue the business. After Margaretha van Banken died, her son Gerard Kastelein took over, and when he died, his widow, Anna-Maria Kolterman, took legal ownership of the company. Looking again at the painting, it is now clear why the couple is sitting hand in hand among attributes of the printing business. It wasn't just a love affair, it was a family affair, where men and women played their equal parts.
Okay, let's move to another century, because we like to introduce another example of how we aim to write women rightfully back into history. This painting you see here on screen is made around 1900 by the Dutch artist Simon Maris, and it shows a girl or young woman seated in a chair. She wears a costume that appears slightly too large and somewhat old-fashioned for the period. She holds a fan, and her back is reflected in a mirror behind her. The painting has been part of the Rijksmuseum collection for over a century. For decades, the girl's identity remained unknown, and the painting was titled using terms we now recognize as offensive, including from the 1970 onwards, the use of the N-word. Just before the start of the project, our intern Lisa Lambrechts dived into the archives to find more information on the girl. Could she be traced? Could she be identified? Lisa made a spectacular discovery in the archives of the Netherlands Institute for Art History. She found pictures of the girl. And in these pictures, you see indeed that she wears a costume, not her own clothing. The surroundings were recognizable as the atelier of the artist. And below the pictures had been written down a name, Isabella. The researchers also found a receipt on which Maris had written the same name, along with a timetable where Isabella appeared again. More research followed by the women of the Rijksmuseum researchers, but did not uncover more definitive traces of the girl's life. For now, we can only say that Maris, the artist Maris, referred to this girl as Isabella, which was possibly an alias, as was common for models at that time. But although her identity remains a mystery and the research is still going on, we have come a step closer thanks to the discovery of these photos and the fact that we now know that she sat for Simon Maris in his atelier in Amsterdam. This girl has been to his atelier and to Amsterdam. And this case and the ongoing research highlights the importance of uncovering a wider range of women's stories, not only those of white or elite women, but also of voices that are heard less, and it helps us work towards a more inclusive and more intersectional view of women in the past. Now we are finally entering a topic that's closely related to the work of a memorial hall, and that we count as our third pillar, women in institutional history. We do like to consider the museum itself as an object that needs gender reflection as well. Understanding our own institutional history, in which male actors such as founders, directors, and art critics play dominant roles, is key in understanding the invisibility of women within the museum. At the same time, it's our task to fill in the gender gap in institutional knowledge by shedding light on female employees and donors who made an impact on the Institute and who also contributed to shaping the museum into the institution that it is today, just like the female employees you see on this slide. And in doing so, we try to make the museum a gender-aware instead of a male-dominated space. Female donors are an important topic of interest. How did they build their own collections, and how have their donations shaped the museum's collection? Did they collect and donate in ways that differed from men? Last year, Marion published a case study on donor Adia Hondius-Krone, who you see here in the middle of the slide, surrounded by objects that she donated to our museum. And one of her colleagues, Sirian van der Geer, has a full-time position focusing entirely on women who donated objects to the Rijksmuseum collection. In addition to case studies, her research will trace broader patterns regarding these female donors.
We are often asked why we continue to focus specifically on women, especially at a time when broader conversations about gender and inclusivity are gaining ground. Why not turn attention to queerness in history or explore gender in a broader sense? Isn't the focus on women in history a bit outdated? We firmly believe it is not. Highlighting women in history remains essential as long as women's emancipation, both in the museum and in society at large, is incomplete. In fact, we are witnessing renewed tensions around women's rights, both in our own country and abroad. The museum has a responsibility to contribute to awareness and societal change by making women's impact on history visible. But that said, however, it doesn't mean that we cannot make space to explore the complex concept of gender at the museum. And therefore, last year, Mariette Holtrop, Charles Kang, and I, all members of the Women of the Rijksmuseum team, made an exhibition called Point of View, a gendered take on the collection. We examined our collection through a gendered lens by asking gender-related questions to the collection, such as, does your gender dictate what you wear? And did people in the past step outside the gender binary? We discovered that a wide range of objects in the Rijksmuseum collection can offer insights into how gender has been understood throughout history and how perceptions of gender have shifted over time. One gallery, for example, focused on clothing and demonstrates how views on color and form have evolved. In the 18th century Western Europe, pink was considered perfectly appropriate for men's fashion, as shown by the costume on the left. On the right, you see a 20th century women's costume, which illustrates how pink came to be associated with femininity in Western culture.
And while the concept of gender as a spectrum may be a relatively modern idea and not always easy to trace back in historical collections, we still aimed to explore expressions of gender identity in the past. In history, there have always been individuals whose identities, expressions, and life experiences went beyond traditional binaries. Sometimes this was temporary, such as in theater or during the carnival, and sometimes this was more permanent. And one of the most extraordinary examples, we think, is the Chevalier or Chevalière Dion. Born as Charles Dion in the early 18th century, they lived as a man for about 50 years before continuing the rest of their life as a woman. The reasons for this remain unclear, but Dion is a fascinating example of someone who changed their gender presentation during their lifetime. And in addition to reflecting on the past, it felt essential during this exhibition to also look ahead. And that's why, in collaboration with our educational department, we launched a project in which we invited vocational education students to explore gender self-expression through photography workshops. When it comes to gender ideas, Generation Z, can speak out loud for themselves. In this video, they reflect on the project and share with us how they see and understand gender today.
Samen met 10 mbo-studenten hebben we de afgelopen maanden gewerkt aan een fototentoonstelling over genderidentiteit voor de Point of View Takeschool Takeover.
Ik dacht ten eerste heel erg uit mijn comfort zou komen. En ik dacht, wat voor een manier beter door dat te doen door een tentoonstelling uit te proberen. En ik heb laatst stapsurgery gehad en ik wil het heel graag vieren op een manier. En toen dacht ik, waarom niet het tentoonstellen aan iedereen?
Met mijn concept ben ik best wel een kant van mij op gaan zoeken die ik niet zo snel aan anderen laat zien. Omdat normaal ga je misschien wat minder snel uit je comfortzone. Dus dat is wel iets wat ik ook heel erg heb geprobeerd. Om wel een beetje de grens op te zoeken van wat ik normaal zou durven. Dus daarin heb ik wel geleerd dat ik ook op onverwachte plekken zeg maar kracht kan vinden in mezelf. Die ik niet eerder zeg maar had verwacht.
Het was heel erg spannend, ook gewoon dat de eerste keer zat ik een corset in mijn leven aandeed. De eerste keer sinds dat ik niet meer klein ben, dat ik de hakken van mijn moeder aandoe, dat ik nu zelf hakken heb gekocht en die dan aandeed.
Ik wil gewoon aan mensen laten zien dat ik transvrouw ben en ik wil gewoon die transvlag gewoon op mijn gezicht hebben.
Je eigen gender ontdekken is heel leuk en is heel bevrijdend. En het is net zo normaal eigenlijk als leren wat voor eten je lekker vindt en wat je favoriete seizoen is en wat voor kleding je het liefst aan hebt.
A selection of their works was featured in the final gallery in our exhibition, offering a glimpse into how this generation imagines a more inclusive and less biased future. Their photographs have since become part of the Rijksmuseum's permanent collection. That underscores our view that gender and women-related topics should not be confined to temporary exhibitions, but be embedded within the museum's permanent narrative. Our annual conference is also a place to broaden up gender questions. We find it important to reach outside of the walls of our museum and exchange knowledge and experience with international colleagues and experts, as you all do today. So therefore, we organize an annual conference, and this year or upcoming year, March, is already the 5th edition and will be centered around the theme, "The Future is Female." You're of course all invited, and it will also be possible to join online. So, it's time for some conclusions. Our mission is fair and equal representation, making women's presence in art and history visible and embedding the female narrative in our DNA. We aim for a lasting impact in the museum, not just another passing wave. And we strive to make this female presence sustainably visible and, above all, self-evident. But we are not yet there, we think. Shifting the perspective is a constant effort and, as already mentioned, highlighting women in history remains essential as long as women's emancipation, both in the museum and in society at large, is incomplete. The museum has a responsibility for this, a responsibility to contribute to awareness and societal change by making women's impact on history visible. Let's hope for a future in which we, as gender-aware institutions, can help and inspire each other in the way forward. Thank you very much.